الو سامعيني؟
هلو.
مساء الخير.
مساء الخير، اهلا دكتور، كيف حالك؟
يعني هلا دكتورة جنست، اذا بتحبي تبلشي لانه صار ماضي 8 دقائق.
يلا.
We might as well please.
اوكي. بتحبوا احكي بالعربي ولا بالانجليزي ولا اخلط؟
البرزنتيشن بالانجليزي.
كلها بالانجليزي.
اوكي، احكي بالعربي بس كمان طعمي شوية بالانجليزي اذا
اوكي.
لحد هلا ما في اجانب معنا، بس في حالة انه دخل حدا بعدين. هي جيفاني، فلذلك بالله. هاي جيفاني، حاولي يعني كمان تساعديه يفهم please.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
So, hello everyone. Just to introduce myself, my name is Janset Shawash. I see a lot of familiar names in the list, so nice to see you again. It's been a while. And I'm happy to be part of, I'm happy to be part of the iHERITAGE project because I've been following what's been happening, and it's really useful. And it really sheds light on some technological aspects and conceptual aspects and theoretical aspects which are dearly missed in Jordan. And I'm really happy that it's taking place. So today I'm going to be talking about my perception and my experience in the interpretation of heritage content for VR and AR media. I will turn off my camera just so that the net is smoother. Just a moment, where does it go? Okay. Yeah. Sorry for the dry title, but it sort of explains what exactly we're going to be talking about. Just to introduce myself, I'm an architect and an urbanist. As an urbanist, I am planner, designer, historian as well. Many of you know me because I worked at the German Jordanian University for a long time. And heritage has been a topic of interest for me, like through my most of my life. One question about heritage that was really important for me was how to understand it. And the other one was how to conceptualize it. So on the first level, it's how to perceive it, like how to accept it with the senses and think about it and what have you. And the second question is how to conceptualize it, how to frame it for the future, how to contribute to it and change it in a way that would suit the society and suit yourself and help you to situate yourself within it. So the first question actually I kind of addressed during my bachelor's degree and master's degree at the University of Jordan. I did a lot of documentation. In my bachelor's degree, I did actually with Dr. Fakhouri a design for a children's center in Fes, which also targeted and addressed heritage. But then with time, I did my PhD at University College London, and one question really bugged me. And that was, if you remember 2010s, even 2000s, there was a lot of hype about heritage, like the law of heritage was being passed. There was a lot of hope for the heritage, especially the built heritage of Jordan, to be preserved, conserved, and developed. But when you would talk to normal people, they would not really feel the same way. And at the same time, we were seeing a lot of buildings being demolished, a lot of heritage value buildings being demolished. And even until now, although the heritage law was passed, the built heritage law, it is not yet fully implemented. There is still a lot of obstacles in its way. So it's really important to understand why is that happening, and not just blame circumstances, but really try to get to the bottom of it and try to change it. So with kind of progressing in my work, I became interested in applications of AR and VR, and maybe some of you are familiar, like a lot of work I've done with Nermeen, who has been very active in this project. So for example, this is an example of and kind of an artistic addition to the Citadel Hill that our students did. So that's sparked my interest in using augmented reality and virtual reality in not just in education, but in its application to heritage context and to urban design. So it's really interesting for me of how to design for virtual space and how to merge virtual space with real space and how to implement it using available technology with a view to the future. So here are some images from, for example, this was a project I also worked with Nermeen on in Ras Al Ain, which was to kind of reimagine and re-envision a different future for the Sail, which is the seasonal river in Amman, and kind of see an alternative future. So these projects have kind of a fantastic aspect. They try to think of an alternative reality, and the technology that AR and VR offers really taps into this kind of imagination. So we had kind of a good experiment run with our students. We got a publication out of it and an app also. So we not just implemented the project, we kind of in AR and VR, but also we had a chance to experiment on it with the students to see the reaction, how well they would engage with it, also how well the people on the site will engage with it, and what have you. So today, that was kind of a brief introduction to how I ended up working on AR and VR in the built environment with a focus on built heritage. So I also will link it to my previous experience and interest in heritage. So today I will talk about a definition of heritage, the uses of augmented reality and virtual reality in heritage, venues, especially versus games, challenges of augmented reality and virtual reality use, and how to design for context specifically. So let's define heritage. So the most simple universal definition today, it was adopted in 2005, and it has kind of been added to and elaborated a lot, but it's basically it's our legacy from the past, what we live with today and what we pass to our future generations. So it has this kind of future dimension attached to it. However, we know that's nothing simple or universal about heritage. So there's a lot of focus on tangible versus intangible dimensions, also the time frame of heritage, which is differs like in Jordan from the rest of the world as well. And each country has a different approach to how to define heritage. There are some kind of regional conventions like in Europe and global conventions on how to identify the heritage, protect it, conserve it, and revitalize it. So in my previous work, in my kind of doctorate, I worked to understand heritage. So like the main points that I went, I produced were that, first of all, heritage is not a static thing, it's a process. And it operates on tangible and intangible levels, so material and immaterial, and they cannot really be separated. So even if we address built heritage today or the tangible heritage, it cannot survive and be sustained without meaning, stories, narratives, different kind of significant aspects, practices that are attached to it and integrated into it. Heritage is subjective. It is a subjective interpretation of the past, and we always need to realize that. So actually, the social interest in heritage is modern. It came with modernity as an interest of society. We always had individual interests in heritage, even going back to, I don't know, Middle Ages, like whenever we want. But as a society that wants to preserve its past, it's a phenomenon of modernity. And that's why we find, for example, now that we have kind of progressed from modernity to the postmodern times, that our relationship to heritage is also changing and shifting. Heritage is present-centered, so although we are talking here about the past, it's really, we are looking at it through a lens of the present. So it's really a reflection of who we are currently, even if we want to preserve it for the future. So it's really shaped by the present. And the present here is consists of culture, politics, social conditions, environment. All of these layers contribute to our lens with which we see the present and we see heritage. And of course, heritage is strongly linked to identity construction. And here it's very important because it constitutes one of the two main uses of heritage. Of course, there are many uses of heritage, but we can categorize them into two primary uses. One is economic and the other one is cultural. So in the economic side, we will find heritage tourism, commodification of heritage, consumption, leisure services, and what have you. On the cultural side, we have social uses, for example, legitimizing identity, providing routing for people, and providing geographical belonging, strengthening identity, creating a sense of ownership of place, and all of that. And with the current state of economy in the world, the neoliberal kind of paradigm, which dominates the whole world, we find that the economic use is predominant. So the economic use of heritage sometimes, and most of the times, overwhelms the cultural use of heritage. And the cultural use of heritage does not get the needed support for it to flourish. So this creates a lot of contradictions and problems and challenges in implementation of heritage. Having talked about a little bit about the definition of heritage, we can now progress to talk a little bit about AR and VR and their implementation in cultural and heritage venues. Of course, which boomed lately with the advancement in technologies, but also with the COVID pandemic, because the focus on digital communication was very high, as you know. The pandemic, although it was a disaster, it facilitated the shift, or not facilitated, but accelerated the shift towards the use of digital communication in a much stronger way. So a lot of museums accelerated their not contribution to the use of VR and AR in their exhibits. So either by allowing the users to tour the museum itself, or by presenting masterpieces from the museum through different mobile apps, website apps, 360, panoramic views, what have you. I mean, a lot of these techniques and technological aspects have been covered in the course, so I will not go into depth with that. This is just a kind of elaboration on what has been going on, just to try to place heritage in that. So, for example, Louvre opened the first virtual reality experience 2019 at the beginning of the pandemic. Several natural history museums started implementing AR experiences. For example, this one is in France, and another one is in London, the Natural History Museum of London. So they also implemented different programs for the use of AR and VR. And here we are talking about introduction of natural heritage and kind of natural aspect of our past into AR and VR. They introduced augmented reality applications, which you can use inside the museum and also outside the museum to kind of keep the relationship between the visitors and the museum strong. Other aspects or other examples of the use of different aspects of VR and AR in presenting urban spaces can be found, for example, in this Curiosité, which presents Paris using different techniques. So, for example, there are virtual tours of different spaces in Paris. Some of them are of historical value, others are kind of a cultural value. and of social value. And the website uses different techniques to present them, starting with like 360 panoramas, and also using like content with smartphones and what have you. So here we go into the realm of cities. And how cities present their spaces using AR and VR. Of course, this is happening online. Other examples, this example targets heritage specifically. For example, the Flyover Zone, it's a company which produced several heritage experiences. Like, for example, the Baalbek temple, the Egypt temples as well, Hadrian Villa, historical games, and Rome was like its first big project. So this, you can experience it as VR using the proper headset. Of course, you can buy the, so it's commercialized, you can buy it, and here we can see pictures from what it looks like, what the experience looks like. So we see a focus on buildings. It looks a little bit empty. The user has the role of an observer. I mean, we can, I'm not even sure if we can walk around, but we can stand and look, and we can't really talk to the people, but we can observe. So the type of interaction between the user and the environment, the virtual environment, is limited. It's not interactive. Several examples also appeared in the region. So, for example, there's a project called Katara, which is a heritage village in Qatar. And it produced several applications, kind of guidelines. There is also a kind of a gamified application for children, which is a game. It's a treasure hunt. So children can actually move around the village and collect treasures using this application. And again, we see that there is a level kind of sophistication, of interest, of trying to make the experience more fun and more enjoyable to the users. So an effort is being put. Another example from the region is Al-Ula in Saudi Arabia. So Al-Ula also, now the Saudi Arabia is, well, not now, but it has been for a while, working on its tourism sector and heritage locations. So Al-Ula is reconceptualized as a place of festivals, of art, of culture. There's a lot of kind of events going on at all times of year, tours, and they're like very artistic and nice spaces and buildings that one can visit. And online, they are presenting also a virtual tour of some of the locations, some of the heritage locations. But as we see, I mean, I don't want to open the website, but this is a screenshot from the website, and you press them. So this is a 360-degree panorama with some interactivities. So you can move inside the building and then click on the information buttons to have some information about different aspects of the building. So we can see the level of effort which is being put in the region and globally to present heritage via AR and VR. And of course, if we take examples from archaeology, which is a discipline which is very advanced in terms of digital documentation, presentation, and modeling, and all of these amazing technologies. But also, we can see that the presentation is a bit static. Of course, this does not represent all of the projects which archaeology offers. However, kind of the interactivity is not very high, especially if we compare it to the world of video game industry. So if we want to aim for something, we would aim to the level of interest and interactivity and engagement that we find in the video game industry, because it shows us what's possible. So for example, of course, not all the video games are equal. But if we look at very good examples, like there's a game called Assassin's Creed. This is Brotherhood, so it takes place in Rome. And it's very well known for its like a great representation of Rome. So it has a high level of accuracy in documentation. It was kind of very highly uploaded for that. And the player can actually interact with the city, of course, in terms of moving through the spaces and having different stories happening in different locations in the spaces. and kind of just going through this amazing render of the city in the Middle Ages. So, for example, this is a video, short video I want to play just to see, just to show you how it happens. So you can walk through the city, you can interact with the characters, you hear the stories, you walk into some buildings, of course, not all of them, but for the ones that are designed for that purpose. You see it kind of around you, you identify different landmarks and what have you. Of course, it took a lot of effort. This is, according to the information I found online, was a $20 million project. So of course, the budget is also quite big for this project. And it had a great impact on the gaming community and on the cultural kind of media production community in general. So we even have replicas and kind of meta representations of spaces in Assassin's Creed, for example, in Minecraft. So it became kind of like a standard for excellence in the gaming industry for the creation of urban space. So kind of having talked about that, what kind of challenges can we expect to have when we want to kind of aim for that level of AR and VR in heritage settings? So we want to take the heritage settings and create a very engaging experience in them so that people would be excited and motivated to use. Well, the first challenge that can be expected is accessibility. This technology requires hardware. So it requires either computers, mobiles, head-mounted devices like Oculus, what have you, and other hardware. Some of them are accessible, some of them are not accessible. So this is a point worth of consideration. And of course, accessibility is not just about the hardware, it's also about the ability to operate that. For example, here, the age and kind of education plays a big role in that. Also the language, because most of the applications are in English and what have you, and the know-how, of course. Another challenge is the quality of content. The quality, as we've seen, that if the quality of content is not very engaging and the experience is not interactive, the people will not be motivated to use it. So here we come to motivation. Do people have motivation to use AR and VR? They might have motivation to use it for games, but would they have motivation to use it for heritage? And here we will talk more about the motivation for heritage in a bit. Another challenge is spillover of museumization practices. So, for example, in the sector of museums and archaeology and even heritage and built heritage, there's something called objectification, kind of solidification of heritage, so that we kind of put the monument on a pedestal and we try to preserve it by keeping it safe from interaction. Well, this has some logics because it could be deteriorated from touching or from people going around it. And we've seen a lot of monuments in the world being negatively affected through interaction. However, this attitude of kind of freezing the monument in time and space and isolating it from the people is a kind of a mental stance, which a lot of disciplines have been trying for a long time to overcome. But it still is present in some of the experiences of AR and VR, as has been shown by like studies done in this field quite recently. Another thing is commercialization of heritage. Of course, we know it's a big problem because it kind of keeps the heritage out of the hands of regular users. It places a financial obstacle to its use, and also limits the kind of incorporation of heritage in the daily culture of people. And of course, the questions of user engagement. How do we engage it? Of course, these are not by far like a full list of challenges, just some challenges which we could address in like in the period of this lecture or this talk. So how do we design AR and VR for context? This is a very complex question. So I don't have all the answers, but we can talk. I can address it on general and specific levels. So on general level, we'll talk about general users, like general approaches to addressing context in user, and specific levels. I will share my findings regarding Jordan specifically, and they can be to some extent translated to other regions as well. So if we look at augmented reality and virtual reality, which at some point will be integrated into mixed reality, but so far, let's keep it at that. So it is part of the human technology interaction discipline and communication domain or discipline. This technological aspect is being developed as we go. I mean, there are like new developments every day, and it's very exciting, and amazing things are happening. Within that domain, there is a subdomain called gamification. And gamification aims to take some aspect from games that we saw, like the excitement, the narratives, but also other aspects which aid to increase the motivation of people. Gamification really works on the motivation, and using those aspects on serious applications. This is a little bit different from serious games. Gamifying serious processes, like for example, I mean, I'm sure everybody knows. I'll skip to the next slide, like education. So some applications like Duolingo, I'm sure like a lot of you are familiar with it. Gamified learning language. So it teaches a lot of languages through this gamified approach. So you get badges when you commit to studying. There is a streak. So if you continue studying every day, you get a bigger streak, and you are congratulated, and you are rewarded with kind of with applause and admiration and cute badges. And it also has a socializing aspect. So for example, you get friends and you follow their progress and what have you. So it has these small gamification tactics within a bigger educational strategy, which really helps people to commit, and it has really a kind of positive effects on learning, which have been shown scientifically. So there's a lot of research going that gamification assists in promoting motivation and how to improve it as well, because it is not a kind of it also has some negative effects. So for example, this is not Duolingo. This is another app which Duolingo developed for children, and it's really effective. So yeah, the gamification is the enhancement of software via design features borrowed from video games. And it really aims to work on users' motivation towards activities or use technology, and to increase the quantity and quality of the output of these activities. So it focuses on commitment to the function and enjoyment of it. And it has been already employed in education, health management, government systems, e-commerce, like all over the place. Of course, another very familiar use is with health applications. So you can not just track your progress and be congratulated on it, but also kind of socialize with your friends and see their progress and what have you. And of course, it motivates one to engage in it more frequently and better, and enjoy it more. So in the gamification framework, as kind of been suggested in research and practice, there is kind of a very logical framework on how to go, which starts with project preparation, and then kind of context analysis, user analysis, production of ideas, and ideation, design, implementation. And then we have evaluation, monitoring. And here we focus on context analysis and user analysis, because these are really address the context and user as an inseparable component of the context on a global level. So here we're talking about human nature, human psychology, how to impact like a general human. So I will not go into a lot of depth because kind of this is there's a lot of theoretical aspects into it, but of course it's all logical. So for the context, we need to identify the requirements of the context. We need to identify the characteristics of the context, understand it, and define success metrics. So what is our target for the gamification of a certain project or a process? What do we want to achieve? And of course, this also applies to heritage experiences. And for user analysis, we also need to define target users, identify their needs, motivations. And one of the ways that it is done in gamification is through the creation of personas, which is also kind of, it has a psychological connotation to that. So basically, it's building categories or proposing categories of users based on their preferences, gender, age, life situation, so that each persona holds a certain characteristic and need for the gamifying process. In general, a very important theory in explaining motivation or in working for motivating users is the self-determination theory, and it's used very effectively in successful gamifying strategies. So this theory basically says that a person would have intrinsic motivation to do something. Intrinsic meaning that he is self-motivated or she is self-motivated, while extrinsic motivation would be like, for example, offering money or gifts or something which comes from the outside. So intrinsic motivation is really affected by autonomy. So if a person has the freedom to do that thing, of course, if the person is forced to do that thing, they might not be motivated to do it at all. Competence, so the more a person feels competent to do while doing a thing, they will feel more motivated to keep doing it. So we find that a lot of gamified applications actually complement competence quite often. So they give rewards and badges and points and gifts, virtual gifts for to reward competence. And of course, relatedness. And relatedness is that when a person feels related to first to the game, they understand it, they can find meaning in playing it. They can relate to their friends who are also playing that game when it's a social game. And we will find that these 3 points are very important even when we are thinking about heritage. So of course, autonomy is sort of not for granted, but we'll not discuss it much, but we can discuss competence and relatedness in further context. So just an example of this game, it's done in, I think it's in Australia or New Zealand. So it's an AR game where you have a visitor from the past who appears in front of you, and you have to help them on certain quests to help resolve the game. So it has the component of heritage. It is gamified. It is in the shape of the game. It has an AR layover. So we do have very interesting and nice examples of application of AR. So in order to understand the local user, so we looked at the general user, at the human user. Now we're going to look at the Jordanian user because we're talking more about our region. And this can, of course, translate to other users. So first of all, can they access AR and VR technologies? And this is an important question. So we can look at infrastructure and we can look at competence. So in terms of infrastructure, and this data is from 2021. So the population of Jordan, around 66 have internet access, which is a relatively good number, and 61% are participating in social media, which means they are they have the competence for socializing online at least, and around 78% have mobile connections. So they do have the, let's assume they do have the hardware to use AR or VR on a mobile at least. Now we all know that Oculus and Oculus and other head-mounted devices are less accessible in Jordan. I mean, now they are becoming more accessible due to kind of relaxing regulations, but they are still quite expensive and they're not very, they're not available like at all outlets. So there's still kind of a development curve for them to become ubiquitous in Jordanian homes. This is the result of a small survey that Narmeen and I did for one of our researches. So basically, we were trying to see what kind of phones people have, because we had an assumption that like everyone would have an amazing phone, but we were kind of shocked to see that not everyone has, not shocked, but surprised to see that a lot of people don't have great phones. But statistically, it showed that, at least for this small sample, that like on average, people do have phones which would allow them to kind of implement or use the AR or VR applications. Of course, there's still a lot to be done, and I guess like even with technological innovation, this technology will become more available, easier, and easier to use, and cheaper. So now, kind of going from the aspect of technology, so we can see that it is accessible to some extent, and it will become more accessible in the future. And of course, the know-how, I don't have statistics on that, but we still need a lot to work on the know-how of how to produce AR and VR. But I think the use of AR and VR is quite user-friendly. And when it's introduced strongly to the market, like people will be able to engage with it. What about people, like the Jordanian people's conceptualization of heritage? So they might accept and embrace AR, VR, but how do they feel about heritage? And this was like a very interesting question for me, like about 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So I'm going to share now some findings from my doctoral work. They are a bit outdated because since then we had the Syrian crisis, the Syrian civil war, and the COVID and what have you. But they do give an indication of how Jordanians feel about their built heritage. So my case study was in Amman, and I was targeting specifically the downtown, the Al-Balad of Amman, because at that point in time, Al-Balad was being promoted, well, not promoted, being conceptualized and identified as a important place of heritage, and a lot of projects were targeting to conserve heritage buildings in Al-Balad, and there were proposals for revitalization projects in Al-Balad, which now have been fruitful, and we can visit them in the space. On the other hand, I felt there was a contradiction, because people say that they love heritage or are interested in heritage and its protection, but on the other hand, they don't really act like that. So I wanted to understand what was going on. For those people who do not know what the Amman downtown or Al-Balad is like, it's a commercial space. It's very active. It's also a hub of transportation still, although some of the transportation was diverted to other spaces of the city. And it contains very important Roman archaeology and many heritage buildings which go back to the establishment of the kingdom. So like turn of the late 1800s, I would say like early 1900s, and going on. And in Jordan, of course, heritage is the time frame for heritage is quite, I wouldn't say it's not flexible, but like by law, anything before 1750 is archaeology. After that, it has to be identified as heritage. So there's a measure for value and significance and what have you before it's designated as a heritage house or a building. So my question was, I wanted to understand the perception of Ammanis of heritage spaces and their daily practices and identity perceptions in general. So I'll show you now some of the questions that were asked. The study targeted, or the sample was 1,000 persons from like the whole of Amman. And these are some of the findings that were found. So just kind of to support my narrative. So people were asked, why do you think heritage is important? Most of the people associated with the past. So heritage is important because it kind of gives us information about the past and history and what have you. Only about a quarter of them linked it to identity. So not a big majority of the people thought that they identify with the heritage. So for them, it was something not very, or at least built heritage of Amman, it was not intrinsic to their self-definition. And of course, some of the people also connected heritage with economical research, so they didn't think it was important for their identity or belonging or knowledge or what have you. It was had purely economic value. Another question which was interesting for me was what were the forms of heritage which are important for you? Because as we know that we have tangible heritage, intangible heritage in different forms. So for the tangible heritage, we would have buildings and artifacts such as, for example, clothing, embroidery, crafts, and what have you. And for intangible heritage, we have examples such as stories and narratives, wisdoms, and traditions and customs. So apparently, or not apparently, according to the survey, around half of the people thought that the most important aspect of heritage is the traditions. So it shows that traditions are kind of very important for people, which we really can associate with the Jordanian society. The Jordanian society is, in general, somewhat conservative. Traditions are important. Religion is important, as we will see in a bit. So it reflects on their perception of heritage. We can see that the buildings were considered not the least important, but as an important aspect, the least number of people said it was important. As for what kind of uses we can assign to built heritage, most of the people said the best use for it is to be converted into a museum. And like only a small portion of people said that it could have a functional use, such as school or college, or a private use, such as a residence. And this really indicates, or at least indicated at that time, that we had this kind of commodification of heritage going on, the freezing of heritage, so that if I have a heritage building, I cannot do anything functional with it. I should kind of reify it, put it on a pedestal, like conserve it, preserve it, and not use it rigorously, so as not to corrupt it. So that is the number, like 67.9. And for the type of heritage, or here I'm talking about the scale of heritage, that was most important to people, we can find that religious attributes are very important. So even, for example, in terms of time, and this question was, what time periods do you attribute, do you think the heritage attributed to is the most important? So for example, in terms of religious heritage, people were saying, oh, I think the Umayyad palaces are the most important. And national heritage, people were saying, oh, the buildings which associated with the development of the nation, that period, are most important, and what have you. And even in terms of geographical scale, like when asked what kind of geographical scale of heritage, like do you think is the most important? A lot of people said that it was associated with the Islamic Ummah. And then they went to the level of the nation, and then local, and what have you. So it also reflects, I don't want to say the the political, but this socio-cultural political aspect of identity creation in Jordan. So we can see that not only does heritage affect our formation of identity, our formation of identity really affects how we perceive heritage. And a very interesting question was, which social groups do you think are most attached to heritage? And although the people asked were all in Amman, and most of them, well, not about half of them, associated with the Bedouins, with people of the Badi, and then the village, and then the city, kind of showing that maybe urbanity or the urban spaces are kind of least worthy of being considered kind of as a heritage space. And that the people of the Badia are most attached to their heritage. And this is really interesting because it also correlates to the finding that people appreciate the intangible heritage of tradition and customs. So we have this situation in Jordan where the immaterial culture and the practices of this immaterial culture are still strong in society. So a lot of people, although they do practice heritage practices, they don't consider them heritage. For them, there are traditions, like, for example, cooking and wedding traditions and, like social visitations and all of that. Although it can be considered heritage, for people, it's daily life. So they don't view it as heritage. And yeah, so from the next tables, the observation would be that people do feel strong belonging to Amman. So it's the figure on the right, the bar figure on the right. So people do feel a strong sense belonging of Amman. But in general, kind of, we'll see that this contradicts a bit to the rest. So they do feel a strong belonging to the city, but not to its built heritage. And another aspect of the survey was also very interesting, is to kind of examine how do people use this heritage and how do they practice cultural activities in their daily life. So they were asked about frequencies of certain activities. For example, visitations of archaeology and museums, cultural activities. So this is below, in the figure below, question 401. People were asked how often do they do cultural activities, and sadly, 90% said that they don't. So although in the figure above, we can see that the figure above asked people, what is the most important attribute of Al-Balad, the downtown, as a place of heritage? And they said that the most important attribute is having archaeology and museums, and then having cultural activities and socializing. On the other hand, these same people, they don't do these activities. So it was really kind of contradictory. I wouldn't say contradictory, but it shows a kind of separation of perception and practice. So in perception, they do think that Al-Balad is a place of archaeology, and it's important, and it holds this kind of cultural content and opportunity for socializing. But on the other hand, they don't practice these activities for different reasons. So, there are contradictions in perception of heritage and implementation of heritage and practice of cultural activities related to heritage. So kind of a rough summary of the surveys, and I mean, now they would definitely need updating. So that Al-Balad as a place of heritage, the people of Amman think of it as primarily as a place of function, as a market. So they don't associate markets with heritage and relation with the past and identity and what have you. However, they think that the archaeological monuments in Al-Balad, they are associated with heritage. So there is a strong link between archaeology and heritage. On the other hand, they don't engage with it. So they engage with the market, which they don't consider heritage, but they don't engage with archaeology, which they do consider heritage. So there is this dichotomy between perception and action. So how do we kind of take this further to have some useful conclusions? So how do we design for contradiction and conceptualizing heritage? I mean, how do we take all of this content and create something that people would engage with and use and be motivated to kind of implement and enjoy? So I don't have, of course, the final solutions. I'm not going even to pretend, because it's a very complex issue. However, maybe some notes and guidelines. First of all, to understand that this is everywhere. This is a global phenomenon. Each society has its own contradictions in terms of relation with heritage. As we said, heritage is a process. It's contradictory. It's interpretive. It's subjective. It's political. Heritage is very, very political. So we need to understand this and appreciate it, and also understand that this whole situation is part of the postmodern situation, of post-colonial situation, especially in Jordan, and neoliberal situation. So neoliberalism, for example, promotes commodification of heritage, use of economic services and heritage, while, for example, post-colonial aspects would kind of subvert some or kind of diminish some aspects of history while promoting others. And the postmodern condition also affects our need to belong to a nation, kind of also addresses our wider belongings to the Arab world and to the global society in general. So it is complex everywhere, but still it's being done successfully. So we shouldn't be despaired. Another thing is that we really need to understand the user. And we cannot really design anything successful unless we engage the user, because As we've seen that there's a lot of contradictions, there's a lot of guidelines, like the process, although the process itself is quite straightforward, but how to create content is very complicated. So the technology is there. So on one hand, we have the technological issues, technological implications, but on the other hand, we have the contextual and content issues. So at least once we have the technology resolved, we need to provide the content targeting the user, and the user is engaged with the context. So we cannot really design anything successful unless we understand what the user needs. And of course, on the one hand, we have the user's needs in general. So here we talk about relatedness, motivations, and for this, there is like a long list of tactics, which some some of them are more useful in some settings, and others have been proven to be more useful in other type settings. Some of them are motivational, like the white hat tactics, which use reward, and some of them use punishment, so that the whole process is more exciting for the user. And of course, we also need to engage with identity building from young age. So targeting children is very important because they are the future, they are the bearers of our identity, of our belongings, and they will be the users of this technology because we are still witnessing now its development. But as we've seen, like with the internet, with the mobile phones, with all these technologies, it will arrive very soon, and they will be the target of this technology. So we need to kind of introduce them to the whole thinking of heritage and use of technology from tender age. And of course, we should not focus only on tourism and foreign visitors. So we should aim to balance the economic culture use of heritage, because this way we will create a kind of a loyal group of users who not only engage in this practice and develop it, but also market it to the rest of the world. So these are some of the notes that I can share. So now maybe this would kind of initiate a discussion. So yeah, that's my 2 cents, and I think I forgot to put the thank you slide. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Shawash. That was very interesting. Before we start the question answer discussion, I just need to make sure I know who is with us. I see Ignacio. I'm guessing, is it Ignacio Arce?
Yes, Hariri. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon.
Hi, Ignacio. I have Ala Bataine. Am I right? We have 3 Ala or Ala. One of them is without the family name. The reason I'm asking is that I need to put the full names to the donor when we make our reports. فعلاء بطاينة معنا ولا مين علاء اللي عندنا؟ في عندنا علاء عمرو، علاء غيدان وعلاء
علاء عامر.
علاء عامر.
عفوا
علاء.
Talal, I have some students in this session. We have some students from GJU in this session.
Okay, but I need to know the full name.
It's Ala Amir for me.
Ala Amr.
Amro بالواو, but we say Amir.
Yeah, okay. There is also Ala Ghidan. مظبوط؟ بس في كمان آلاء ثالثة بدون اسم العائلة. Well, anyway, we have Del. Is that Danny?
This is actually Rami Daher.
Rami Daher. أهلين هلا.
أهلا.
Del. Rami Daher. Okay.
Yes, دكتور.
تفضلي. We are also في عنا لبنى.
Yeah, it's لبنى علاونة.
لبنى علاونة. أهلا وسهلا.
أهلا.
I'm sorry, but just so that we can report the names. Is any one of you not signed? Yani you did not sign in the survey. Because again, we like to make statistics about those who attend. Narmeen, can you give?
I didn't have it. Can you put it bil
Can you
chat?
put Narmeen, please? Can you put the link to the survey?
Okay, I will.
Thank you. Thank you. الآن we have, I think, Ignacio was the first to raise his hand, so please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, Talal. Good afternoon,
Hi.
Janset and everybody. So thank you very much indeed for this interesting presentation. There are many things I would like to comment, but starting from the end, your concern about this apparent contradiction when trying to conceptualize. I think that we have to be more relaxed, because I think that at the end of the day, it's a matter of communication and the way we convey all this information to the public. We can imagine that 50 years ago, people, they were not talking about heritage, they were talking about ruins or hirbat, or, and it took, like 40 years so that the people will identify and label these sites not as ruins, but as archaeological sites, and then some more time to be identified as heritage sites. So I think it's a matter of the education and this awareness that we have to convey to the local community by means of the work that we are doing. So I don't see any contradiction in this conceptualization. I think that the matter is that we have to have very clear ideas resulting from analysis, from discussion, and from depurating and going really to the root of the problem. And once we have understand and we have a quite coherent way of thinking and understanding this heritage and this concept, we can conceptualize and we can convey them to the public. I think that this is somehow the way I would put the question that you are asking. Then afterwards, the other issues are, on the one hand, the way we make more effective this communication effort, and the instruments that accordingly we choose for that. I would stop here to facilitate the communication, and I would like to know about your ideas. Thank you.
If you allow me just to reply to the point of awareness and the efforts that I would say archaeologists and architects practice in the field of heritage conservation, and also not just the architects and archaeologists, but also everyone who works in the field of tourism and the field of even culture production and media production. Of course, they contribute to this level, but I think that it requires a more structural approach. I think it should also be a part of the educational program. So, like from what I know, that it has been introduced to school books and what have you, but is it really seriously considered? That is a question. So we cannot wait for the kind of consumerist culture to generate this need for belonging, generate a need for identification with the heritage. We need a kind of a popular, not an outburst, but kind of a popular buildup of this. And of course, this has not been equal at all phases. So, for example, as heritage is product of modernity, and before that, so from the establishment of the kingdom until the 50s and 60s, we saw a strong attachment to heritage, and not just heritage, but the kind of preservation of old buildings, preservation of nature, collection of there were وصفي tell used to promote the collection of old poems and traditional poems, and not just old, but kind of the popular and vernacular poems and stories and what have you. So it has been practiced, but maybe later due to the neoliberal economies, due to the changing political aspects in Jordan, this has been subdued. So I think that in order for everyone to feel related to heritage, we need kind of a popular national incentive to strengthen the sense of belonging. Of course, now a lot of people might argue against nationalism, against kind of attachment to a nation due to, for example, the negative effects. But I think that some level of nationalism and the feeling of belonging to a nation, even if it's an imaginary one, is quite important for us to motivate, use, engage with heritage.
Okay, Dr. Rami, please.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Talal. Thank you, Dr. Janset, for the lecture. It's very interesting. I have 3 very quick comments. One is basically within all of these virtual reality and examples and exercises, I'm worried about the dominance of the image, basically, the dominance of the visual at the expense of the narrative. We can argue that, for example, yes, there can be narratives developed and content developed and what have you, but we all know that, with this certain approach to experiencing heritage in the past and different sites and what have you, there is a dominance of the image. So I would like to actually hear your thoughts on that. The second very quick comment is, I'm not an expert on gaming by all means, but I've watched a couple and experienced a couple, and one has to be a bit alarmed by sometimes the cultural biases and the racism, and many of them are somehow within a very Orientalist, not even Orientalist, within a very kind of like a cheap Orientalist milieu, basically, with their depiction of certain cultures, with their non-depiction of certain cultures, how they represent things and so on. I'm sure that, if this is going to be done for other purposes than just gaming, one would be a bit more careful. But I'm a bit reluctant because I can see these biases and cultural racist issues entrenched, even sometimes on purpose. So one has to be very careful. And the third very quick comment is regarding development of the content, which I think is something that is extremely difficult. And sometimes we underestimate the content development with overemphasis on the development of the software itself and the experience. Both are very important. And I would argue that not every quote unquote heritage expert or historian or whatever is capable of developing the content for such experiences. It would entail all sorts of different backgrounds and experiences to be able to develop such contents. Thank you.
Okay, if you allow me to reply, if I can, to the notes. So the first point is the dominance of the visual. And of course, you are correct to some extent. And this dominance of the visual is primarily because we are not exposed to them. So we will go through a process of habituation, and it will become the normal. So of course, there is like a phenomenon. So especially for the use of VR, like the sense of immersion that you get when you put on the display. At first, it's fantastic, amazing. You might get dizzy, you kind of feel disoriented, but it diminishes with time, and you grow accustomed to it. So it becomes kind of a second normal. Of course, there is a whole science behind it, but yeah. So with time, it will become quite available, and with time, it will be everywhere. And
Dr.
it has a lot of.
Sorry to interrupt, but what I meant here is not getting acquainted to it as much as it is a dominance of the visual at the expense of the narrative. People not actually
it's not because it's okay. Gaming itself has not been taken seriously until lately. But given the millions of people who are actually play games, and they're not just kind of, they are from all over the world. About half of the gamers are women. The average age of a gamer is 35 years old. So they're not children, and they're not just men, and they're not just in the West. So we need to acknowledge this type of medium. It's a type of medium we have not used to its full extent. And here, discussing it in terms of applying to AR and VR, the experience can be implemented as a game, but it also can be implemented as a serious experience. So we should use the technology to our own benefit and not be driven by it. Now, my concern really is that the dominance of the visual is not because the visual is so amazing, it's because the content is lacking. So actually we need more people to contribute to the content. We need not just kind of programmers, we actually need artists and, you know, like storytellers and poets and painters to produce this content. And we also need to know what the user wants, like in terms of, especially when we talk about heritage. So there is this aspect of belonging, aspect of history, aspect of rootedness, as well as entertainment and engagement. So we don't want it to be just a boring thing. We want it to be this kind of a very significant thing to the person, and they go into virtual reality or use augmented reality in real life and see additional elements to that component. So in terms of the biases and Orientalist kind of connotations of a lot of games and the presentation games, of course, you're right. Also because it was not seriously kind of considered until recent years, so it was not critically assessed. So now with the like more studies are being done on game design is becoming a very, it has been for a while, a very serious discipline. There's a huge economy involved in that, so it's attracting more attention. It's still spilling over into other disciplines, so there's also kind of a more critical thinking about that. So yeah, now if we think most of the games are done in certain, like by big companies. So we do have this kind of monopoly over game production. We have a lot of like small producers, but the biggest ones are done by big companies. So we have this also Hollywood effect. So a reduction of culture, like kind of stereotypes which are being propagated. And because they are not exposed kind of very fully, they're not being addressed fully, but it is being mitigated as we go. And I'm also saying that we should take games seriously. We should take the content seriously. We should be critical of it. We should kind of engage with it and aim to improve it. As for development of content, yes, I mean, that's like my whole point, that technology is being developed. It's amazing, and it's going into the future, like it's kind of it's space level stuff. However, the content is lacking, especially like for games, it's there because it's entertainment, there's a lot of money in it. But for heritage, because usually the budgets are quite tight, so they don't invest in poets and painters and storytellers and, you know, like to come and inject it with this interesting content. So yes, so that's one of the points, that we need to produce interesting content to attract people to use these technologies to engage with heritage.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Lynn has something to say.
Yes, I'm using Knife's account now. Thank you very much, Jan. Miss you a lot. And I think what you have started is a nice debate on not just on AR or VR or the use of technology. And I think what you started with, what is heritage, and there's one heritage that we are talking about, is the main issue. And as long as we see heritage in an elitist manner, maybe, the other aspects coming with it, like the way we narrate our heritage in heritage sites, the way we are inclusive in it or not, the way we actually proclaim our key heritage sites or key archaeological site or key even world heritage site. So I feel that as long as we move in that direction and we do not tackle the different understandings of heritage, whatever we do in terms of using technology or not, we reflect on it. And I think we need seriously to assess that point and how it can affect and how we can use actually technology to solve these problems that we have seen happening in this notion of presenting and protecting our heritage, and even assuming that we know what other people think of heritage. Thank you.
And just as a reaction to this comment, yes, of course. So the technology will arrive, but like right now we have a lot of challenges in the interpretation of heritage as it is, I mean, per se. So we have these challenges in museums, on heritage sites, on archaeological sites. We see like the lack of engagement, the lack of maintenance, sustainability of some of these initiatives, while other initiatives thrive. So it's very important to understand what's successful in the thriving part, and to try to implement it, or at least to understand why sometimes our interventions fail. And of course, the content is very important, and how to address the user is very important. So as you say, it's very crucial what you're saying, because it should not be an elitist thing. It should not be only directed to the people who speak English, or who know like history, or are sophisticated or educated. So it should be for everyone, and everyone should achieve this sense of ownership when they visit the site and they know more about their own history. So it's not only kind of elitist versus populist. I really believe that heritage is something political, and that we need to claim it, and that we need to improve it. And as architects, and as archaeologists, and as people who work in it, we do have this responsibility of facilitating or presenting heritage to everyone. And so the technology will arrive, and it has arrived to some extent already. And so it's a challenge for us to create the content for that technology.
Okay, thank you. I just want to remind everybody who has not signed up for the Living Labs, the link for the survey is given. You can see it in the chat section. So please do, it helps us a lot to get good statistics about how this Living Lab is being received. But also I'd like to see if there are more questions. I'd like to point out, because Rami has mentioned a good point about visualization versus content. And we have just finished creating an immersive brochure. The design was made skillfully by Narmeen, and we prepared a lot of text regarding Petra. Unfortunately, the size became 20 pages, and we don't want to extend beyond that. So we had to remove a few things. But I think the outcome came real nice. It has VR, AR, it has a lot of information about Petra, its history, its archaeology, and so on and so forth. I think we will soon publish that one way or another. It might be that it'll be one of the applications that we will be making as an investment, but eventually I'm sure that you will all be able to see it. Okay, more questions please. أسئلة تانية إذا حدا ما قدر يلحق على الإنجليزي بحب يسأل أسئلة نجاوبها بالعربي, please do. We apologize that because we have some guests, we need to use English sometimes. Yeah.
بس يعني نحكي عربي كمان, فأي حدا عنده أي
Yes,
ملاحظة.
if you have questions, go ahead. Well, it looks like everyone is satisfied. بنرحب فيكم جميعا. We're very happy you could join us, especially the new colleagues and guests. And we hope you continue to be interested because we still have a lot more in our program. And every day, you know, every week, every day, we have new ideas for new discussions. But the Living Lab has the main purpose of it is to try and discover new innovative means of using VR and AR in cultural heritage and tourism promotion. And the more you are with us, the more we can benefit from your experience, and we can move on with the project in a way that can help our young people to seek, better employment and better. Ignacio, you have something to say?
Yeah, a couple of things, very briefly. First of all, following what Rami was mentioning, but in the other direction, I think that the fact that we have always focused very visually the perception of heritage. I would like to know if you are looking for the idea of having this multisensorial perception of heritage, that there are several experiences in which not only sound, but also haptic perception and other ways of perceiving our heritage are being done by means of this augmented reality in a multisensorial way. That was one question. The other two things are, first of all, I would like, let's say, to get your new email in order to be in contact, because actually one of my students, Anas Isani, that is here with us, he's now working in a master thesis precisely on the use of games into the use of games to foster the public awareness of cultural heritage, in particular architectural heritage. And I think it would be very interesting and very important for him to be able to be in contact with you as well. And last but not least, just to mention that now we are preparing, a step forward to transform all the virtual reality that we produce for Kusairamra, for Kusairamra and for Kasabah Halabat into probably into an augmented reality guide app. That's something we are now working. We're in the process also of getting funds, but I think that would be also important to discuss, the possibilities and the capacities of collaborating and follow up mutually the work that we are doing. So thank you very much once more for your presentation, and if you can develop a little bit on this multisensorial perception of heritage in general, not only architectural one, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, having a multisensory experience in place of heritage is the dream, really. So, but we also have the limits of technology. So there is a lot of research being done on wearables, like you would get haptic feedback or different other types of feedback from the things you wear. There's a lot of research being done on the sense of smell. I don't know, like even some crazy research on being like on having fans in your face, so you can feel kind of the movement of air around you. And of course, there's a lot of advancements in audio signals. Like you have special audio, and you have like a lot of focus on how to design the audio in order to produce this kind of an immersive experience, targeting the most senses that you can achieve. But of course, is this technology readily available? So on one hand, we have technology which is not yet readily available. I mean, now we have the most advanced parts are the head-mounted devices. We have the visual input, we have the audio input, which is also quite developed. But for the rest of it, it's still under development. I mean, there's a lot of experiments. Are they mainstream? Not yet, but we are getting there. So should we design for that? Of course, we should design for that. So actually the research I'm doing is looking into how to create heritage experiences in the city using AR and VR kind of as a general umbrella term. So an extended reality, because like the vision for the future is that they will become immersed to some extent, to a big extent, in this extended reality component. And of course, the input of haptics, of not just of the advanced technology, but also of film, of music on site, different modalities of virtual reality. So you don't only have the wearables, you also have, for example, something called the dome, which is a room where you have projections in a way that you feel immersed in the site. So use of all of these and also the interaction of them. So for example, you can have an experience, you're telling a story of a certain place, and you could have virtual components in one place, and you can have augmented components in another, and you can have real components as well. So for example, you have the actual setup, the actual building. You want to provide real physical components to that, like interpretation boards, decoration, maybe artifacts, renovation of some parts. You want to augment some of those parts, and through augmentation, you can kind of also provide other artifacts, architectural, structural, what have you, as points of storytelling. So it would have characters standing and interacting with you, or maybe create a whole new kind of portal with the world outside of it. And of course, you can have, so these two are tied to the location. The virtual components, they can happen on site or outside of the site. So the interaction of all of these is still not fully developed. So yeah, I'm looking at that and how to create experiences that would use all of these to the best extent. But of course, the content, I feel that technology will be resolved at some point. So we will have the kind of the smell aspect, and we'll have like amazing audio kind of experiences and very light glasses, which would integrate augmented reality and virtual reality. But it's the content, which is the difficult part, how to create content that would engage the users. And I don't think that there's like 100% full solution. I think they would just kind of keep experimenting and keep trying. And as you said, we try to develop things, maybe not try to develop them for the everyday man. There's not just for the educated elite. So simplify, engage, disperse, and yeah, it's an exciting process. It's still, I feel that it still has a lot to progress, but yeah, I'm happy to be part of it. And of course, I will email you, and let's get in touch.
Thank you. I'm afraid also that what it was told in the 70s, that the media is the message, is somehow also the benefit and the problems that we have to tackle and we have to deal with. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true.
Inform you that we are putting the sessions on YouTube. You can just search for iHERITAGE. One of the lectures that I hope is already there is by Daniel Asmar, who is involved. He is the project manager for an ENI project called MED Games, MED space GAIMS. And he had a very interesting lecture he gave to us, and you might be interested to see that. MED Games, all capital. You know, the letters are capital, but you can find the lecture, I hope, on YouTube by Daniel Asmar.
And sorry, Dr. Talal, but I would also like to add for Dr. Ignacio that I'm fortunate to be working with a very diverse group of designers and researchers. So I have colleagues who work on like audio inputs, on visual inputs, on some of them, I think some of them are working on haptics, also on the sense of smell. I'm not sure about that, but so we have a diverse team at the university, and yeah, it's very interesting what's happening there. So if you have any questions, like any experiments that you want to try, I could try to kind of link up and try to make it happen.
Thank you very much indeed. Especially for my students will be also really very important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think, yeah, Qais, can you tell me your second name, please? You just joined us, it seems.
Hi, I am Qais Ismail. Thank you for this. I just joined you because actually I only got to know about it right now. But maybe
that's okay, no problem. We prefer that you will be with us earlier, but you can follow Pretty soon, this session will be on YouTube. So you can all even review it, see it again, and so on. But please go ahead.
Inshallah. Thank you for, I literally just joined, so I didn't get a chance to see anything, but inshallah I will see it over YouTube. Thank you so much for
Okay.
Always a pleasure to see you guys.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, any more questions, please? أسئلة أخرى? Okay, then thank you for being with us, and I can say good night to all of you, and hopefully we will see you again and again. Maybe in Ramadan we will not have sessions, but sooner or later we hope to meet. Yes, مين كان بده يحكي؟ نرمين؟
لا أنا ما حكيت إشي.
أوكي. في حدا تاني بده يسأل؟ All right then, good night and see you in the next session.
يعطيك العافية.
Thank you. Bye.
شكرا دكتورة. باي باي.
باي باي. باي باي. باي باي.
شكرا جزيلا.
يعطيك العافيه دكتور جانست.
شكرا دكتورة.
نراكم.